Go. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, a very special guest, Rabbi Teldon, a close friend of my family for 4 decades. And I am going to begin with a story that is the absolute truth, not like the lies I usually tell you. This morning, this part, I don't know which part is going to be more unbelievable, that I was up at 5:45 in the morning or the part that I'm going to tell you now. I put on my Chabad.org/radio app, which is from Chabad.org. Everyone's familiar with the website, and they just play random things. It could be a class, it could be music, it could be anything. And who do I hear? I am not making this up. Rabbi Teldon interviewing my mother on a show from Cablevision from literally at least 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. And it was literally, I thought I was being stalked. It was bizarre. I listened to the whole thing. So that was a sure sign from Hashem that we need to have this interview, this very special Wednesday night, just to tell the good rabbi. So ever since COVID, almost a full year ago, every night we have 10 minutes of Torah study. Sunday nights we do halacha, other nights we do different contemporary issues, Purim, of course, Pesach. And Wednesday nights we feature a special guest from the world of Lubavitch. We have traveled the world, the globe, and I always and only bring the absolutely finest and most interesting people to meet our community. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you are well. We really, really appreciate it. We know it's an hour later there in New York. It's late at night, but we really appreciate your being with us. So thank you, 1,000 thank yous for joining us. Let's get started. Thank you. Let's get started. Give us a little background. How long have you been the Shliach, the Rebbe's emissary to Long Island? How many Jews are there on Long Island? How many Chabad houses? Give us a little bit of a feel of the facts and figures of the story of Chabad of Long Island.
All right. First of all, thank you very much, Rabbi Epstein, for the introduction. And it's always a pleasure. The Epstein family means a lot to our family. One of the first families we met when we moved out to Long Island in 1977.
Wow.
Parents
that was before Zoom.
Yes, definitely. And we always have fond memories of those times, and seeing you and your brother running around also. I was just asking my wife if we attended your bar mitzvah, and I think the answer was yes, probably.
Yeah.
What year was that in?
1978.
Okay, yeah, so it probably was. Any case, so I have a close connection to Chicago because I have about 9 grandchildren and 2 of my children there. So I get out to Chicago every once in a while. Like recently, I just drove out to Chicago. My wife and I wanted very much to see our kids. So we drove out in the end of December to Chicago for a day. And we drove down to Texas for 2 days.
Oh, wow.
This is to avoid any airplanes and any airports. And we stayed, of course, just in the kids' houses. And then from San Antonio, we drove for 3 days back to New York. And en route, my son from San Antonio called me and said, "I'm sorry, Dad, but I just tested positive for coronavirus." And sure enough, on day number 3 on the trip, my wife had to drive the whole way because I wasn't feeling too well.
I thought he was going to call you and say, "Hey, I forgot you forgot your slippers. You have to come back."
Right. In any case, but thank God we both had a light case, and we're feeling fine. I'm very, very happy to be able to meet some of your friends and congregants, and hopefully we'll have a very interesting evening.
We're looking forward to it. So take us back.
So to give a little background, just to share with you, in 1970s, going on shlichus was not such a common thing. And it was really like the Wild West almost, the way it worked. I mean, I felt almost when I came out to Long Island, even though it was only, let's say, 40 miles, 50 miles from Crown Heights, but I felt like, they took a slingshot and they just put me in it, let go, and wherever you land, good luck. In fact, just to exemplify that, I'm under the Lubavitch Youth Organization, which takes care of all the shluchim in the metropolitan area. And when I was assigned, I was the first shliach assigned in the metropolitan area. So I came to them, I guess I was kind of like the Corbin, they were testing things out with me. So I asked them if I run out of money, which I didn't have any anyway. I started off with $20,000 in pledges, was how we started our whole organization, and we had barely $100 in our pocket. And we came out to Long Island. Unfortunately, there was a family out here that was willing to give us their house, and they wanted to move into Crown Heights for a year, and we didn't have to pay rent. And I really believe that because of that, we were able to survive that first year, because we had no money. Maybe there were 10 people on Long Island who knew what the word Lubavitch meant out of the 400,000 Jews that lived on Long Island at the time. Now there's probably about 300,000, because so many have left the island or passed away or moved to the holy country down in Florida. And it's a little bit of a different world today, as I'm sure it probably is in Chicago as well, as far as the Jewish community is concerned.
So fast forward us now, almost 50 years later, how many Chabad institutions are in Long Island?
So now we have 38 Chabad houses, about 52 shluchim, and their wives.
Amazing.
Their wives, of course, are also very active. As you know, the Rebbetzins and the Chabad are full team players and partners, and work very hard on whatever they do, and they make a very important contribution. So it's really a team effort. Especially my wife is a real go-getter and a doer and a mover and shaker, and she was on Oprah a couple of years ago, and she travels the world as far as speaking. So she's a real speaker in the house, and I must say she accomplishes a lot on her end.
So let's jump in on that.
I just want to share with you the story about when I first went to the Lubavitch, the board of the Lubavitch Youth Organization. And since we're talking amongst friends here, I can share this kind of inside story with you. And I asked them if I ran out of money, if there would be any available. So the Rabbi Raskin, who was in charge, Olav Shalom, a very special, very great leader in the world of Chabad. So I received a very interesting answer from him, which I want to share with you. And he said to me that there is a law in the Code of Jewish Law that when you go to war, that you should only surround, the Jewish army should only surround its enemy in their city, their village, on 3 sides. You must leave an escape route. And the reason being because as long as they know they have an escape route, they're not really going to fight as hard as they possibly could, because they're always going to be looking over the shoulder and listening to the captain, and he's going to say, okay, we tried our best, now let's get out of here and survive as best as we can. So that was the halacha. And reason being, of course, if you surround them from all 4 sides, then they're going to fight to the death. So he looked at me and he said, you should consider yourself out on Long Island as if you're surrounded on all 4 sides. In other words, it's sink or swim, right? And in those days, there was no support system. There was no training school. There was no shluchim office.
There was no internet to reach out to friends for models, and no Chabad.org. So you show up, you and your wife, full of gung-ho enthusiasm, 1978.
So we showed up. We went to Stony Brook partly because the community was in a very panicked mood, because there was a national Jews for Jay movement that had moved from Texas to Stony Brook, specifically for the purpose of trying to convert Jewish kids. So although I had no background really in understanding and knowing about Christianity, but I found out very quickly that I had to learn something about it, because I had to be able to respond to and debate and argue with the people who were trying to convert these Jewish kids. And it was literally like a little marketplace. We'd set up our table in the student union, and they would be next to us, and the Moonies would be on the right, and then the Harry Kishkes would be on the left, and there would be Sweet Chin Noise would be over there also. In the 70s, it was a very big, big time for searching and for getting involved with all these different groups. And it was very interesting, and we had quite a few very interesting discussions, a lot of arguments, and they moved, but there were a lot of students that we were able to save from getting involved in that group. And I'll share one story with you that I didn't know it, but the fellow who I was living in his house, he himself was a deprogrammer.
Ah.
Now, for those of you who don't know what a deprogrammer means, it means they go off and they are hired by parents to kidnap their kids on the streets when they're going and they're soliciting, or they're selling their goods, or they're handing out their literature. And somehow, I don't know how they do this, but they literally kidnap their kids and they bring him to a secluded place. And I didn't know it, but my basement was the secluded place. So
You
one
wonder what
day,
those chains were.
right, one day I get a call from Larry, and he says, "We're coming tonight." And at that time, I had no idea what he was talking about. But I said, "Okay, I'll set up the beds." And he said, "No, don't worry about the beds. I have a whole bunch of yeshiva guys. It's going to come out." He says, "All right, you want me to cook for you, or my Chaya will cook for you?" He said, "No, really, don't worry about us. We'll come whenever time we can." So I stayed up. My wife went to the bed. I stayed downstairs, waiting up. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I hear a car pulling up. Literally a white cargo van with no windows pulled up to literally, like, there's a big front yard, but it pulled up on the grass, literally to the porch of the front door. And I'm standing there, like, with my eyes wondering what's going on. I see them opening up the back of the cargo van, and I see a body bag on the floor of the cargo van. So fortunately, within about 2 or 3 seconds, the body bag started moving and started making some noise. And the yeshiva boys went in and they pulled him out. They didn't want him to start screaming and catching any attention from the neighbors, attracting any attention. And they brought him in, and little did I know, but there was a fake wall in one of the walls downstairs in the basement. You push in a particular place, and there's a whole room behind there, which is a windowless room. And we had about 3 of these deprogrammings in our house. And thank God, in fact, about 5-6 years ago, I met one of the fellas who was deprogramming the house. Now he's living in Borough Park. He's very happy. He's a grandfather, and he has 4 children of his own, and he's working in a store in Borough Park. And he was always always stayed in touch with the people who owned the house, because he felt so indebted to them, as were the parents really as well. But that's just a little
That's wild. So
story.
they rescue these kids out of some sort of cult,
Yeah,
deprogram them, put them back on the straight and narrow, and you think you're just out there on Long Island in a nice, bungalow, colonial, and all of a sudden there's secret walls and what else?
Yeah, in those days, it was literally war. In other words, they were just trying to hop Jewish kids all over the place. And it was really very intense. And on campus in particular, it was very intense. I mean, that didn't last past the middle 80s, but it was a very, very volatile time for the Jewish community, because people were really searching, and kids were not satisfied with the Judaism that they were being taught and that they were being presented with by their temples or congregations or whatever they were going at the time. There was literally no orthodoxy on Long Island at the time. There was there was a small day school, the Hebrew Academy of Suffolk County, which Baruch and Heshi went to. And there was just the beginning of a Young Israel in Patchogue, which was way out in exit 63 on the Long Island Expressway. Nassau County had also the Hebrew Academy in Nassau County, and there was no kosher restaurant in the whole place. The whole area, we had to go to Queens for any kosher pizza. So it was really quite bare at the time. And thank God, over the years, it's very interesting how things have developed, and perhaps the same things in Chicago as well over the years. That is that, on the one hand, the assimilation has become much more intense and much more a much greater percentage of the Jewish population really identifying as no identity in terms of Judaism. On the other hand, there's been a solidification really of strong Jewish communities in the 5 towns. Has an amazing Jewish community, very, very strong. That's where the Epsteins live. That's where, Baruch, you lived there for how many years?
When I was 14 until I went to yeshiva. So
okay.
3-4 years, yeah.
All right. And so very beautiful community. The Epsteins belong to a very nice shul. There must be 30, 40 shuls in 5 towns now.
Yeah, at least, sure.
Incredible accomplishment, what they've done there over the last just 30 years or so.
So you start off in Stony Brook, you're dealing with these crazy cults and these stories and people being kidnapped into your house. How many years did you stay? Stony Brook, just to give people, it's like Northwestern. It's a pretty Jewish college, and it's sort of in the community. It's not way out. So how long did you stay there, and then how did it start to grow to now, as you described, more than 30 Chabad houses throughout Long Island? Can you give us at least a little thumbnail of how it developed?
Okay, I'll give you a quick background. basically what happened was after 2 years, the Jews for Jay packed their bags and saw that they weren't making too much progress over there, fortunately. So
Hashem.
that was great for us. And we continued to do some things on the campus, but I saw that the Jewish community was really growing. And there was a JCC that was just starting off in Comac, which is where we live now. So we wanted to really be more centrally located to be able to service the whole of the Jewish community. And I felt that eventually I could hire a rabbi to do the campus and just concentrate on that while we really worked on the bigger picture of trying to develop Long Island. So we moved in 1983, 84 to Comac and started activities over here. By 1986, 7 or so, we had a full-time rabbi, Rabbi Grossbaum, who moved to Stony Brook. And now he has 3 rabbis working under him. One of them is full-time on campus. And he just, in the last 6 months, completed a 13,000 square foot on 8 acres building right smack in the middle of Stony Brook, right near the campus. So a beautiful location, and it's really an amazing place. It's, I think, the first building of a Jewish center in Long Island of any denomination in the last 10, 20 years almost.
Wow.
So in addition, so we started bringing out shluchim. We started opening up Long Island and finding areas. I would find a couple of balabatim in the community that would want to be supportive. And I would interview different people and bring them to the area and help them out. Sometimes I help them out financially myself. Sometimes if it was in a more well-to-do area, I would just ask a couple of balabatim if they would be able to help out. Sometimes they came out with money of their own from their parents or from family or friends. And it was just a kind of a slow snowball effect that sped up, I'd say, in the 80s and the 90s. And, I remember thinking in Stony Brook, thinking that, wow, if we ever have 12 shluchim on Long Island, that would be amazing, to be able to have that many shluchim in the area. But, the shluchim are really, I consider them all like spiritual entrepreneurs. They're incredible people and their wives, and they give up, the potential to have wonderful jobs and professions, and they're so dedicated and so, just breathing Yiddishkeit, breathing love, breathing concern, breathing dedication to our Jewish people, breathing dedication to the Rebbe's ideals and the Rebbe's teachings. And, it's just been so amazing over the last 43 years that we've been a shlichus to see how shlichus has really grown incredibly. I mean, to think that today that there's over 5,000 shluchim. I attended the first keynote, and I remember there were maybe 50 of us, and we went around the room and introduced each other. And nobody except the Rebbe could have ever imagined that Chabad would become this amazing network that it is today. And in those days, in the 70s and 80s, people would ask, "Is there a shliach in Thailand or in Las Vegas?" Or today, the question is not, "Is there?" And the question is, "What's the address?" Because it just, even for me, I am humbled by these young shluchim, some of whom never even saw the Rebbe, who were going out to these far distant places. And this young man who's in Myanmar, in Burma.
Yeah.
I know him. I've met him a couple of times. He's a young guy. I remember when he told me he was going to Burma, I was like, wow, that's really, he's just, the dedication is just incredible, that he just wants to be part of the world of shluchim, and he's doing.
We've had some of those here on our Wednesday evenings. We had the shliach in Cambodia. We had 2 weeks ago. He's actually from Chicago. Shliach in Montana, not even in Bozeman, Montana, but like in rural Montana.
Whitefish.
Whitefish, Montana. Whitefish makes Bozeman look like Yerushalayim. So yeah, we're big fans.
Cambodia was Rabbi Butman?
Yeah, his wife is from Chicago.
Did he tell you how he started his shlichus, how he ended up in Cambodia?
He gave us a little bit of the background, but you can share with us, please.
So he shared at a Kinas Shluchim at one of the conferences for the the Balabatim, when the supporters were getting together. So he said that he wanted very much to go out on Shlichus, and he would really, it was at a time when Far East was really starting to open up, and there are a lot of countries that were, as we say in Lubavitch, available. and so he was very curious, but he really wanted to be in Thailand, closer to, so to say, civilization. So he was there as a yeshiva boy.
Imagine Thailand is considered civilization.
Exactly.
We had to go to Queens.
So he was there. No, I think he was already married. He was there with his wife, and he asked Rabbi Cantor if there was a place perhaps where he could go in Thailand. He said, Rabbi Cantor said, no, I have no place right now, but if you want, Passover is coming, very apropos, very this time of year. Passover is coming, and if you want to go there for a Seder, they have put in a request for having a couple for making a Seder. So he said, great, we'll go. And he figured that way he can maybe impress the rabbi, and he hopefully will give him a place in Thailand afterwards. So they go out, they're at the Seder, and a few days before, and of course, they got to meet a lot of the people there, and there was a nice chemistry there. And as they were making the Seder, things were going well. They had a nice turnout. And then it came time to find the Afikomen. So the Afikomen, his Afikomen was missing. So he started looking for it, couldn't find it. And he asked, who has my Afikomen? And the president of the kind of Jewish community there said, I have it, Rabbi. And he said, okay, what do you want for it? He said, you have to move here. So he said, no, come on, serious. What, what do you want for the Afikomen? He said, I am serious. And that's how he ended up in Cambodia.
There he is, as crazy as can be. So we know this isn't your first foray into major media. Rabbi Teldon hosted, and are you still doing the Cablevision TV show? And maybe how did that come about? What was the background of that? And can you share sort of how that developed? And Rabbi Teldon is also a published author. You can go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and you can find his book. So maybe share with us some of those aspects of how you're bringing Yiddishkeit to the people in Long Island via the medium of television and authorship.
So going back to the 90s, I felt that Chabad House itself can be very limited as far as the output. This is before internet, before we really had the type of access to anybody in the world that we have these days. And I heard about public access television. And I looked into it and I said, wow, this is amazing, free time on television to be able to do something. So I put together a volunteer team and found a director, somebody who knows a lot about the chyrons and all the other equipment pieces. And he trained a few of my friends, and we basically every other week we did 2 shows. We would shoot 2 shows over at Cablevision at their studio. They provide the studio free of charge also. The only expense really was the tapes themselves. People were happy to be on the show. They didn't require any money whatsoever. And we have, I had about 200 shows that we did. I have now still about 100 that I saved that were like the best shows that I show them on a 2-year cycle.
When my mother was on.
Right, of course. And that was one of the best shows. It was really that. There's a reason why Chabad.org picked that one to keep it. I don't think they show any other shows besides that, because they have a whole bunch of them. But that was, it's very down to earth. It's very applicable. I'm sure you've had your mother speak for your crowd before. And they know that she was wonderful speaker, very personable, very down to earth, very just a pleasure to listen to. And she really has a very solid, very good message. In this particular case, it was about marriage, but she can talk about a lot of different things. So that show went on for a while until we started a school out here in Suffolk County. And for those of you who ever started a school, it's very hard to find free time to really run a television show at the same time also. So I started doing my what do you call them? Retakes,
reruns.
Showing, huh?
Reruns.
Thank you. I started showing my reruns in about 2004, 2005, and then those are still going on. They're still every week on Cablevision. It's one of the few Jewish programs on Cablevision here in Long Island. And now, in fact, tonight, in fact, I'm on Vas's Nice, has a WhatsApp news. So there was an advertisement, which I never saw an advertisement on that app service. And it was about podcasts. And I've been wanting to put all the shows onto a podcast, to create a podcast on different platforms. And just tonight, I got this advertisement, somebody who does it. So I just got off the phone about an hour ago, and I'm going to convert all the shows. Just, what you do is you just take the audio off of it and just turn it into a podcast, and they'll put it onto all the different platforms, and it's we'll see what happens. But today it's just so amazing, through Facebook and through YouTube. And I used to be a little bit opposed to it. I was an old timer and I didn't like it. But then I went to a JLI conference and somebody was talking about the advantages of Facebook. And I said, you know what, if they can do it, let me see, I'll try it out. And I was amazed by the numbers of, the ability to reach people that I never knew, I don't know. They're from different parts of the world, and they're watching my class or my talk or my interview or whatever it might be. And so I became a Facebook fan. And of course, you had to be careful, and you had to be very discreet. And I finally talked to my wife after 5 years. I talked my wife into doing it also, with much hesitation, but she only accepts women as friends on her Facebook account, and she's very careful also, but she can get 500, 600 people watching one of her classes, and it's just incredible numbers that you could never have in person. And today, between these charity campaigns, where in 2 days you can raise $500,000 to having concerts with millions, not millions, 100,000 people watching, and on 3 days' notice. It's just such a different world today. And I think this is part of what the Rebbe was talking about, that the Rebbe saw in the 50s already, that we have such potential today, and each individual can do so much to affect the world and affect other people, and to be able to really leave their mark in a way that no generation before us ever had that opportunity. And you can have people who are in the middle of nowhere and don't know anybody, and maybe stay in their room, and it could be teenagers that are just little techies that can really have an effect, a far-reaching effect on many people in different parts of the globe. It's just an amazing world we have. And of course, as I'm sure those of you who know Chabad already know, that the Rebbe always wanted us to take advantage of whatever technology we could to spread Yiddishkeit and to teach Jews about what Torah is all about, and to try to bring more truth and morality into the world. And so it's just an amazing situation today. And the amount of Torah that's being taught on the computer, on Chabad.org, online, it's mind-boggling. And dating myself back to the 70s, when we used to put together a newspaper, and we did it with press letters. Those of you who remember that, I had to press the letters onto the paper.
If you ran out of the letters, you had to think of a different word.
It was so difficult, and everything then was had to be created from scratch. I remember the first time Rabbi Shlomo Lakin came out with a calendar, which all the shluchim could use. Yeah. And that was like such an invention, like somebody came along and, wow, what a great idea. Now I know it's a multi-million dollar system that is supporting shluchim, where shluchim have everything at the tip of their fingers. I mean, anything they want, they can get from headquarters, which has developed an amazing resources to help the shluchim in our work, so we can really focus on people and on doing the things that we love to do.
Amazing. Rabbi, we're coming up now as the whole world, 1 year just about since the shutdown and COVID. This has been one of our responses, to have the Torah in 10 every night for a few minutes of learning, and Wednesday night to feature some special guests. What were some of the projects? We all remember a year ago, you're in New York. We know that it was the virus went through there in a very, very devastating manner. Right. Can you give us some of the things that Chabad in Long Island did to respond to that situation, and probably are still doing?
Very much so. And for much of the community, they're still pretty much in quarantine and isolation and lockdown. And slowly but surely, even people who are just recently getting the vaccine are still taking a slow transition. It's not like they're jumping back into life as usual. So I must admit, it was just incredible, literally incredible to see the creativity of all the rabbis and the rebbesons during this past year. I mean, to totally remake yourself and remake your organization and recreate it, reboot it, the energy, the creativity, it was just a sight to see. We had a tremendous amount of outreach to the individual. We had a tremendous amount of do-it-yourself kits that were sent out to families all over the place. I mean, just as an example, my son Mendy, who now runs the Chabad house here in Comac, for Pesach is sending out 600 boxes. Each box is probably, it costs them probably, I don't know, $15 or so, just to be able to make sure that everybody has all the tools they need to be able to make their own Seder. For Rosh Hashanah, we gave out whatever you needed. By Rosh Hashanah, we were able to have a tent, but of course there was social distancing, so it was very limited as far as size. So everything was RSVP'd, which I'm sure is done by you as well. And we always kept within CDC guidelines. We had, from our summer camps, we had 6 of our 7 summer camps opened up. And we didn't have any cases of coronavirus amongst the children who attended. Because again, we were very, very careful. The girls that came out to be counselors had to quarantine themselves for a full week before camp started to make sure that they were not, were not in any of any risk to anybody who was coming to camp. And there was just a lot of calls to people's homes, to staying in touch with them, because people were lonely. People were very lonely, and there was cases of depression. There were situations where people just worried to the nth degree about what's going to be. And fortunately, we did not have, amongst most of the Chabad houses that I've been in touch with, I've been in touch with almost all of them, and we made funding available for anybody who really came onto hard times, but we didn't have too many situations with people who really came onto hard times. Unfortunately, also, I mean, although there were, unfortunately, very sadly, some deaths from COVID, but it wasn't as if there was a massive losses that you might think sometimes in some situations. Crown Heights, for instance, took a much bigger hit than any other community that I can think of out here on Long Island. Crown Heights was hit terribly with many deaths, many people I knew, many people that I am still, I'm sure, knew, and it was very, very sad, very sad.
Rabbi, I want to thank you so much, for joining with us and sharing this with us. We always like to leave a few minutes. Sometimes people have a question. If you give us a couple of more minutes, Mel, jump right in, buddy. Give us a question.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Rabbi. It's a real honor. Rabbi, listen, you mentioned you kidnapped these kids.
He was an innocent bystander.
I didn't do the kidnapping.
No, I understand. You sent a couple of stalkers out, but
no, I understand.
Yeah, how did you do that physically? Was there any concern about the police maybe getting the wrong idea? How long did these kids stay there? Did all of them turn out to be
on the
okay?
advice of his legal team, Rabbi Teldon will not be answering this question.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I never participated in any of those activities. All I did was I opened up the front doors so that the owner of the house could come in and do what he did. I was rather nervous at the time, obviously, when everybody was there, and as they were as well. They knew that what they did was totally illegal and they could get themselves arrested. And I'll tell you the truth, I didn't speak about it to anybody for probably about 15 years after it happened because of the statute of limitations. I didn't want to get anybody into trouble. But these were, and I really don't know if there was ever a case in the United States where somebody who did this for the sake of trying to deprogram somebody was ever tried in court for doing that. Although it's obviously illegal, but I never heard of any case of somebody actually being prosecuted on that basis. I don't know if there's a reason why, but I hope that answers your question.
All right, what, Mel, you're muted. You got to unmute.
Mel, unmute.
Mel, you got to unmute
I
yourself.
did. Oh, yeah. Were they minors or they were already past 18 or when they, and did they try to escape? Were they actually physically locked in there?
In the house they were locked in. One of them ended up, he was very smart, and he made believe that he was deprogrammed, and they took him to another place, to a camp upstate, and he escaped from that location, and he became a real big hero in his group. In fact, it was right up in Time magazine about him as a result. So I
What a story.
they were all about that age, about 18.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was easier if they were younger because their parents had signed documents that they were still, legally responsible for these kids. So
Yeah, that's probably happened. Yeah.
but
And
I would guess.
And who did it? Were they like stuck? Were they Hatzalah type guys, or where'd you get the men that can grab
No,
them?
I didn't get them. I had nothing to do with
Okay.
it.
He's innocent, I tell you.
Yeah. I take the fifth.
You're not. You're not in
I'm
trouble.
not,
Rabbi.
I'm not putting my face on.
You have to
Okay.
put your face on. You don't get to talk unless we get to
Yeah,
see you.
I don't. They were Jewish, Jewish people who did it. I don't know how they did it. How do you pick up a kid off the street and just take him away? I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. That should be written up one day.
It is.
After you're sure the statute of
No,
limitations.
it is. There's a Rabbi Shia Hecht in Crown Heights, and Rabbi Epstein can get his book. It's called Cult Busters, and two of the cases that he talks about in that book happened in my house. But he has about 18 different stories of cult busting that he did. And he waited 15 years before he published the book.
Smart guy.
Let's do
It's
that, Rabbi.
a fascinating book.
Check it out, Rabbi. Let's read. Maybe we'll talk about it one night.
You can have
we'll
Rabbi
have to
Hecht.
see.
Have Rabbi Hecht
From
as
an
a speaker.
undisclosed location.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, Mr. Pine.
Okay, so one of the questions that I always ask every shluchim is the number of times they met with the Rebbe, and what were some of the comments and how many times, and I mean, to me and everything, I find them to be such amazing stories. When people walk in, they're nervous. They go in there either to find out questions, where to go, or about who they should marry, and different things or so. Can you give us a few of those types of situations?
Sure. I had the schus to go in for a personal audience with the Rebbe 3 times. 2 as a yeshiva bacher, and the 3rd I was a chassan. I went in with my bride and both of our parents. And the first time I was nervous as could be. And as soon as I walked in and I gave the Rebbe my letter, my zettel, and the Rebbe was reading it almost like he was like squeezing the words out of the paper. I never saw anything like it before. And he was scrolling down the paper, and then he looked up at me, and as soon as he looked up at me, I just felt totally calm, and I was just, all the nervousness departed. I will share with you one thing, and Rabbi Epstein, I don't know if you saw on My Stories. Do you hand out the My Stories?
Sure, absolutely. Crane Nailing is our biggest supporter. Who's the sponsor of the My Story.
Oh, really? Okay.
sure.
So 3 weeks ago was My Story. So I'll share with you one of the things that was on My Story was I asked the Rebbe for a derech, for a path in tshuva. And because I had studied a lot of Chassidus, and there's a lot about tshuva and Chassidus, about how to return. And I thought the Rebbe would recommend a particular discourse, or maybe to say a particular psalm, or to study a particular Shari Tshuva, Shari Yamuna, some book by some great rabbi from previous generations. But instead, the Rebbe said to me that you should reach out to your fellow Jews to help them understand not to do what you did. And at first I was very perplexed by that answer. It was very hard to understand, because I didn't know what the Rebbe wanted me to open up a store and put a sign, anybody who did this and this and this thing, please come talk to me so I can talk you out of it. So I didn't understand what, but I think the Rebbe, as I gained more understanding of the Rebbe and the Rebbe's whole approach to this generation, the Dor HaShvi, this seventh generation, this generation before Mashiach, a generation of that's during, as I mentioned, during this incredible time in history that we live in. The Rebbe's emphasis was always to look out, to look to another, to not to, I could spend my whole life thinking about I did this and I did that, or feeling guilt, or feeling shame, or working on upgrading the level of my prayer, of my my hiddur mitzvah, and adding this extra thing to this mitzvah and that extra thing to that mitzvah, and it becomes very, very self-consuming in a way. And the Rebbe's emphasis was, you don't have to look at yourself, look at others, help others. Bring, this is a time that we all need to reach out to somebody else and to do something to bring people a little closer to Yiddishkeit. The world needs values, the world needs morals, the world needs purpose to such a great degree. And we have that opportunity, each and every single one of us. And the Rebbe said, don't be consumed by your low self-esteem or whatever it might be. Go out and touch another Jew.
Beautiful. Rabbi, I want to thank you 1,000 times. We never had go this long. This was so fascinating, interesting, and we could talk all night. We want to really express our appreciation to you for all that you've done and for sharing it with us and giving us these beautiful stories and another perspective, another view of how the Rebbe continues to change the world all around.
My pleasure. I just want to say that everybody is very fortunate to have a rabbi like Rabbi Epstein.
It's kind of you to say. Thank you so much. Kushner Freilichem Pesach, Rabbi Teldon's books. You can just look on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and you can read more and more about it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Good night. Good night tonight, everyone. Remember, tomorrow night at 9 o'clock.
Thank you,
Rabbi
Parsha
Insights.
Okay.
Tomorrow night at 9 o'clock for Parsha Insights. Good night, everybody.
Take care, Baruch. Regards to your parents and your brother.
I will definitely do so. Thank you.